The street was alive with the usual hum of city life, cars honking, hurried footsteps clicking against the pavement, voices merging into an indistinct murmur. Towering skyscrapers framed the sky, their glass windows reflecting the setting sun in sharp golden streaks. It was just another day for him. Another day where he walked these streets, barely noticing the world around him. Dressed in a sharp navy blue suit that screamed money, he strode forward with the air of a man who had conquered everything. His name was whispered in the financial world with both awe and fear, a self-made millionaire who had climbed from nothing, building an empire brick by brick. Wealth, influence, power, he had it all. And yet, in that moment, all of it vanished. He hadn't meant to stop. In fact, he rarely took notice of anyone outside of business. But something made him pause. A frail figure on the sidewalk caught his eye, a hunched elderly man struggling with two large paper bags. The plastic handles cut into the old man's thin fingers, trembling under the weight. The man's coat was too large for his small frame, his shoes worn and cracked. The millionaire hesitated. His usual instinct would have been to keep walking. After all, he had places to be, deals to make. But something within him stirred, a small voice inside, an almost forgotten instinct. Before he could second-guess himself, he stepped forward. "Here, let me help you," he said, his voice more commanding than gentle. The old man flinched at first but didn't resist as the millionaire took the bags from his shaking hands. They were heavier than expected, filled with what seemed like groceries. A flicker of something passed through the old man's sunken eyes, surprise, maybe even gratitude. "Thank you, son," the old man muttered, his voice raspy with age. But the words barely registered. Because as the millionaire adjusted his grip, his gaze drifted downward. And that's when he saw it. A mark. A symbol. A tattoo, inked on the old man's wrist, partially hidden under the frayed sleeve of his coat. His breath hitched. His heartbeat slammed against his ribs. That symbol, he had seen it before. Not once. Not twice. But in a place buried deep in his past, a memory locked away, suffocated beneath years of wealth and distractions. And now, standing in the middle of a crowded sidewalk, it returned with full force. His hands grew cold, his throat tightened. The symbol was a circle, broken in the middle by 3 vertical lines, jagged and uneven as though scratched in desperation. His stomach lurched. The shape wasn't just familiar, it was haunting. The old man noticed the sudden change in his expression and frowned. He shifted slightly, pulling his sleeve down in an almost instinctive motion, as if realizing too late that he had revealed something he shouldn't have. The millionaire's mind was spinning. Where had he seen it? The memory hovered just beyond reach, taunting him. He had spent years burying the past, hiding from it, remaking himself into someone new. But this moment, this single glimpse, was peeling away those layers. And for the first time in years, he felt something he had long forgotten. Fear. Who was this man? And why did he have that mark? His voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. Where did you get that tattoo?" The old man stiffened. His eyes darkened, his frail body suddenly less fragile, more alert. A shift in the air. Then, without warning, he turned and walked away. Fast. Faster than a man his age should have been able to move. The millionaire stood frozen for a second, then snapped out of his shock. "Wait," he called, moving after him. But the crowd had thickened. The sea of people swallowed the old man whole. By the time the millionaire reached the corner, panting slightly, the old man was gone. Vanished. Like a ghost. But the memory of that mark was burned into his mind. And for the first time in his life, he had the sinking, unshakable feeling that he had just touched something he was never supposed to find. The millionaire stood at the street corner, his pulse hammering in his ears. His gaze darted across the moving crowd, scanning desperately for the old man, but he was gone, vanished into the blur of pedestrians and honking cars. A chill ran down his spine. That symbol. It wasn't just a vague memory, it was something buried deep, something his mind had tried to erase. But now, it clawed its way back to the surface, demanding to be acknowledged. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. His entire life had been built on control, on logic, on moving forward without looking back. He had risen from the ashes of his past, leaving behind the wreckage of his childhood, the struggles, the failures. Yet in a single moment, all of it felt fragile. He had to find that man. He turned sharply, striding toward his car, a sleek black sedan parked near the curb. As he slipped into the driver's seat, his mind raced. Where had he seen that symbol before? He gripped the steering wheel, staring blankly at the road ahead. Then it hit him. The orphanage. A jolt shot through him as the image flashed in his mind, walls of dull, peeling paint, the scent of mildew and old books, the cold echo of footsteps down an empty hall. He had spent his earliest years in that place, surrounded by children just like him, abandoned, unwanted, forgotten. And on the wrist of one of the oldest boys there, the one who rarely spoke, the one who always seemed to know more than he should, was that exact same symbol. The realization sent a shiver down his spine. The boy had been different. He never played with the other children, never laughed, never cried. But what stood out the most was the way the adults treated him, not like a child, but like something dangerous. The memories came in fragments now, disjointed and unclear. He remembered whispers among the staff, the way they watched the boy with wary eyes. And then, one night, the boy was gone. No explanation. No farewell. Just an empty bed where he used to sleep. He had never thought about it much. Children came and went from that orphanage all the time. But now, years later, the same symbol had appeared before him, on the wrist of an elderly man. It couldn't be a coincidence. His hands clenched into fists. His past was coming back for him. And he needed answers. A trail gone cold by the time he arrived at his penthouse apartment, his mind was a storm of questions. He went straight to his office, grabbing his phone and dialing a number he rarely used. A deep voice answered on the second ring. "Sir? I need an investigator," the millionaire said without preamble. "Tonight." There was a brief pause. "What's the case?" He hesitated. How did he even explain this? That he had seen a man with a strange symbol that had somehow haunted him since childhood? It sounded absurd even in his own mind. Just find someone who can track people. Someone good. Understood. I'll send you the best. The call ended. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The logical part of him screamed to let this go. He had built a life free from the past, from the struggles of his youth. He was a businessman, not some detective chasing ghosts. But logic didn't quiet the unease in his chest. That man wasn't just some stranger. And he couldn't shake the feeling that if he let this go, he would regret it. A lead emerges hours later, his doorbell rang. He opened it to find a tall, sharp-eyed man in his late 40s standing there. Dressed in a simple but expensive-looking suit, the investigator had the air of someone who had seen too much of the world and had long stopped being impressed by anything. "Mr. Carter sent me," the man said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You have a missing person to find?" The millionaire closed the door. "Yes." An elderly man, late 70s, maybe early 80s. Gray coat, frail build, walks with a slight limp. Last seen today on 5th Avenue, near 47th Street. The investigator raised an eyebrow. That's not much to go on. The millionaire hesitated, then reached for a pen and paper. He sketched the symbol from memory, the three jagged lines cutting through the circle. He wasn't an artist, but the shape was clear enough. The investigator took one look at it, and froze. For the first time since stepping into the apartment, his face lost its calm, unreadable expression. A long silence stretched between them. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the investigator asked, "Where did you see this?" The millionaire's pulse quickened. "You recognize it?" The investigator didn't answer immediately. Instead, he carefully folded the piece of paper and slipped it into his pocket. "You should forget about this, Mr. Carter." His breath caught. That was the exact response he hadn't wanted to hear. "Tell me what you know," he demanded. The investigator hesitated. Then, after a long sigh, he said, "That symbol belongs to people who don't like being found." A chill ran down the millionaire's spine. The investigator turned toward the door, already stepping away. "I'll see what I can find. But if I were you," he glanced back, "I'd stop looking." The door shut behind him. The millionaire stood there, his heart pounding. He had spent his life chasing wealth, power, success. But this was something different. This wasn't business. This was personal. And he had the sinking feeling that he had just crossed a line he could never return from. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, casting long shadows across the sleek wooden floors. The millionaire sat in his leather chair, a cup of coffee untouched beside him, his eyes fixed on the city skyline. Normally, mornings were routine: wake up, check stock reports, attend board meetings. Not today. Today, his mind was locked on the investigator's last words. "That symbol belongs to people who don't like being found." The way the investigator had reacted, the shift in his tone, the tightness in his expression, confirmed what the millionaire already suspected. This wasn't just some forgotten memory from his past. This was something dangerous. Something powerful. And yet, he couldn't walk away. His phone vibrated, snapping him from his thoughts. He grabbed it, glancing at the caller ID. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Who is this?" A rough voice spoke on the other end. "You were looking for me." His breath caught. It was the investigator. "I found your man," the voice continued. "But you're not going to like what comes next." The millionaire straightened. "Where is he?" "Meet me at the corner of 12th and Lexington." "Alone." "In 1 hour." The line went dead. He sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. Something about this felt wrong. The investigator had been reluctant before, almost fearful. Now, suddenly, he had answers. A trap? A warning? He didn't care. He needed to know the truth. A meeting in the shadows. The millionaire parked his car a block away from the meeting spot. He preferred to be cautious, old habits from his early business days. Walking the last stretch on foot, he adjusted his suit jacket, masking the tension brewing in his chest. The street was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The occasional car passed by, but there were no pedestrians, no bustling city sounds. Just the whisper of the wind and the distant hum of traffic. Then he saw him. The investigator stood near a bus stop, hands in the pockets of his trench coat, his gaze scanning the area. The millionaire approached, his voice steady. "You have something for me?" The investigator exhaled sharply. "I shouldn't have looked into this. But I did." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. "This is what I found." The millionaire took it, unfolding it slowly. A name. An address. His pulse quickened. "This is the old man?" The investigator nodded. "But that's not all. He was declared dead 35 years ago." Silence hung between them. The words didn't make sense. "Dead?" the millionaire repeated. "Then who did I see?" The investigator shifted uncomfortably. I don't know. But I can tell you this, whoever he is, he's connected to something much bigger than you or me. He hesitated, then added, and he's been watching you for a long time. A chill ran down his spine. Me? The investigator nodded. I dug deeper than I should have. Turns out, you weren't just some orphan who got lucky and made it big. You were chosen for something. And this man, whoever he is, was part of it. The paper in the millionaire's hands felt heavier than it should. He had spent his whole life believing he had carved his own path. That he had built everything from nothing. Now, the cracks in that belief were starting to show. What's at this address? He asked. The investigator hesitated. Answers. But I wouldn't go there if I were you. The millionaire's jaw tightened. Then it's a good thing you're not me. He turned and walked away. He had spent years running from his past. It was time to face it. A door to the past. The address led him to the outskirts of the city, a rundown neighborhood filled with aging buildings, their brick facades crumbling under years of neglect. He parked in front of a small, decrepit house with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. The air felt thick, heavy with something unspoken. As he stepped toward the door, something inside him screamed, "Don't do this." But he knocked anyway. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, the door creaked open just an inch. A single, tired eye peered through the gap. Recognition flashed across the old man's face. And in that moment, the millionaire knew, this was no coincidence. This man knew him. Knew who he was. Knew everything. Before the millionaire could speak, the old man whispered something so quietly, so urgently, that it sent ice through his veins. They're coming. Then the door slammed shut. The sound of tires screeching behind him made him spin around. A black SUV had pulled up. The doors flew open. Men in dark suits stepped out. No words. No hesitation. Just the cold certainty that he had just walked into something much, much bigger than himself. The millionaire's instincts kicked in before his mind had time to process the danger. Run. He pivoted on his heel, bolting toward the alley beside the house just as the men in suits surged forward. Their movements were precise, practiced, like wolves closing in on prey. He didn't wait to see if they were armed. He didn't need to. His heartbeat pounded in his ears as he sprinted down the alley, dodging broken crates and puddles of murky water. The smell of damp concrete and garbage filled his nostrils, but he ignored it, focusing only on escape. Footsteps thundered behind him. Fast. Too fast. They were trained for this. A dead end loomed ahead, a rusted metal fence with razor wire curled at the top. Think. His eyes darted left. A fire escape clung to the side of an old brick building. He lunged for the ladder, grabbing the cold iron bars and pulling himself up with sheer adrenaline. A gunshot rang out. The sound ricocheted through the alley, making his ears ring. They weren't just here to talk. He climbed faster, his muscles screaming in protest as he swung himself onto the first platform. Below, the men had reached the fence. One started scaling it, another barked orders into an earpiece. He didn't wait to hear more. He kept climbing. By the time he reached the rooftop, his breath was ragged, but he couldn't stop. The city sprawled below, lights flickering like distant stars. He ran across the rooftop, his polished shoes slipping on the gravel. Another shot. A chunk of brick exploded inches from his shoulder. He dove behind an air conditioning unit, pressing his back against the cold metal. His mind raced. Who were they? Why were they after him? A memory surfaced, the old man's whisper. They're coming. This wasn't random. The old man had known. He had warned him. And now, the millionaire had led these people straight to him. A wave of guilt threatened to drown him, but he didn't have time for regret. He peeked over the edge of the rooftop. The men had split up, two scaling the fire escape, one heading toward the street. He needed a way out. Now. His eyes landed on an adjacent building with a lower rooftop. It was a long drop, but he had no other choice. Taking a deep breath, he sprinted forward and leaped. For a split second, he was weightless, suspended between survival and a deadly fall. Then he hit the rooftop hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Pain jolted up his arm, but he forced himself up. Keep moving. The next fire escape led him safely to the street, where he disappeared into the night. A desperate return. By the time he reached his penthouse, he was drenched in sweat, his expensive suit torn and dusted with dirt. He slammed the door shut, locking it behind him, his breath still uneven. What just happened? His mind reeled as he paced the living room. The men in suits. The gunshots. The chase. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out with shaking hands. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Who is this? A deep, gravelly voice spoke. You shouldn't have gone looking. His stomach turned to ice. Who are you? A pause. Then, a warning. Then the line went dead. He gripped the phone, his knuckles white. His entire body screamed for him to stop, to forget this ever happened. But he couldn't. Not now. There was only one person who had the answers. The old man. The truth unveiled. He arrived at the house just before dawn. It was eerily silent, the streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. The door was slightly ajar. His gut twisted. He pushed it open, stepping inside cautiously. The interior was sparse, dusty furniture, peeling wallpaper, a single flickering lamp in the corner. Then he saw him. The old man sat in a wooden chair, staring at the window as if expecting him. You brought them here, the old man said quietly, his voice devoid of blame. Just fact. The millionaire swallowed hard. Who are they? The old man finally turned, his sunken eyes locking onto his. You don't remember, do you? Remember what? The old man exhaled, rubbing his temple. They told you it was an orphanage, didn't they? The millionaire stiffened. What are you talking about? It wasn't an orphanage. The old man's gaze darkened. It was a testing ground. A cold chill swept through the room. That's impossible, the millionaire muttered. I was just a kid. A normal kid, the old man shook his head. You were never normal. Silence. Then the old man slowly rolled up his sleeve. Beneath the wrinkled skin, another symbol was tattooed. Identical to the one the millionaire had seen before. His stomach twisted. No, the old man's expression was unreadable. You were part of something bigger. Something they created. The words hung heavy in the air. Then the old man leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. You weren't supposed to survive. The room felt colder. The millionaire stared at the old man, his pulse a chaotic drumbeat in his ears. You weren't supposed to survive. The words echoed in his mind, clashing against everything he thought he knew about his past. This is insane, he muttered, shaking his head. You're telling me I was part of some experiment? The old man's eyes didn't waver. Not an experiment. His voice was slow, deliberate. A selection. The millionaire's throat tightened. For what? The old man hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. Then he spoke. They weren't just taking in orphans. They were choosing certain children. Children with potential. Ones who could be shaped, controlled. He exhaled. Most didn't make it. The words sent a shiver through him. He had spent years clawing his way to success, believing he was in control of his fate. Now, this stranger was telling him that his life had never been his own. The millionaire clenched his fists. And you? What were you? The old man's face darkened. I was one of them. A handler. Silence. The revelation hit like a gut punch. The man he had tried to help, the frail old figure struggling with grocery bags, hadn't just been a random stranger. He had been watching him. Why are you telling me this now? The millionaire asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The old man leaned forward. Because they know you're awake now. And they won't let you leave. A heavy weight settled in his chest. He had spent his entire life moving forward, refusing to dwell on the past. But now, the past had found him, and it was hunting him down. What do they want? The old man's gaze sharpened. To control you again. Or to erase you. A cold shiver ran through him. He had barely escaped last night. He had seen how they moved, how efficiently they hunted. These weren't ordinary men, they were trained, methodical. And they weren't going to stop. His mind raced. How do I stop them? The old man sighed, rubbing his temple. You can't stop them. He paused, then added, but you can run. The words ignited something in the millionaire, a spark of defiance. I don't run, he said through gritted teeth. The old man studied him for a long moment. Then, for the first time, a flicker of something like approval crossed his face. Then you'd better be ready for what comes next. A noise outside. Both men stiffened. The old man's expression turned grim. They're here. The escape. A low hum vibrated through the walls, a car engine idling nearby. The millionaire's pulse quickened. He darted to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peek outside. A black SUV was parked across the street. Another one pulled up behind it. Dark figures stepped out, moving with quiet efficiency. They were surrounding the house. The old man reached under his chair and pulled out a small, dust-covered duffel bag. He unzipped it, revealing a handgun and a bundle of cash. The millionaire's stomach twisted. You were expecting this? The old man gave a humorless chuckle. I've been running from them for years. He tossed him the gun. Looks like it's your turn now. The millionaire caught it, his hands gripping the cold metal. He wasn't a stranger to weapons, his business dealings had put him in circles where self-defense was necessary, but this was different. This wasn't just about protecting himself. This was survival. The old man moved to the back of the house. There's a way out through the basement. A tunnel that leads to the other side of the block. But it won't take them long to figure it out. The millionaire nodded, adrenaline flooding his veins. Then let's move. A knock at the front door. Gentle. Almost polite. A voice followed, calm and measured. Mr. Carter. We know you're in there. The millionaire felt his breath hitch. They knew his name. The old man gestured sharply. Go. The millionaire hesitated. What about you? A shadow crossed the old man's face. My fight ended a long time ago. Yours is just starting. Something inside him rebelled against the idea of leaving him behind, but there was no time to argue. The old man shoved him toward the basement door. Go. The millionaire turned and ran. A world turned upside down. The tunnel was narrow, damp, and smelled of rust and mold. He moved quickly, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. Behind him, muffled voices filtered through the walls. The sound of a door being forced open. Then, gunfire. The sound rattled through the tunnel like a distant thunderclap. His jaw clenched, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The tunnel led him to the basement of an abandoned warehouse. He climbed out through a rusted grate, emerging into an empty alley. For a second, he just stood there, chest rising and falling rapidly. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He swallowed hard and answered. Who is this? A familiar voice. Not the old man. Not the investigator. Someone else. You should have stayed asleep. The line went dead. The millionaire lowered the phone slowly. The warning was clear. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The alley was eerily silent, the air thick with the scent of damp concrete and rotting garbage. The millionaire stood frozen, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. You should have stayed asleep. The words replayed in his mind like an echo from a nightmare. Whoever had just called him, they knew everything. He forced himself to move, stuffing the phone into his pocket and scanning the alley for an exit. He needed to disappear before they found him again. The old man's sacrifice had bought him time, but not much. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had always been a man who thrived in control, but right now, the ground beneath him felt like it was crumbling. His entire life had just been flipped upside down. But one thing was clear. If they wanted him to stop, it meant he was getting close to something. And he needed to know what. A dangerous lead, the investigator. He was the only other person who knew what was going on. If he had been scared before, he'd be terrified now. But he also might have more answers. The millionaire pulled out his phone and dialed his number. It rang. Once. Twice. No answer. A cold pit formed in his stomach. He tried again. Straight to voicemail. Not good. He needed another way to track him down. The investigator had given him the old man's address. He had to have a source. Maybe someone in law enforcement, or old contacts in the underworld. He just had to find out where. The millionaire headed toward his car, parked a few blocks away. Every step felt heavier, the weight of the unknown pressing on his shoulders. He climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. His mind was working overtime, piecing together the puzzle. The orphanage wasn't just a home for lost children. It was something else. A selection process. A training ground. But for what? And why had he been chosen? A sharp noise snapped him from his thoughts, a car engine roaring behind him. His grip tightened on the wheel. He glanced at the rearview mirror. A black SUV. Not again. It accelerated, closing the distance fast. His pulse spiked. He didn't think. He just reacted. Slamming his foot on the gas, he swerved onto a side street, tires screeching. The SUV followed. They weren't just following him. They were hunting him. The chase the city blurred past as he weaved through traffic, pushing the car to its limits. But the SUV was relentless, matching his every move. A highway on-ramp loomed ahead. He veered onto it, heart hammering as the engine roared. The SUV followed, gaining on him. Then, the passenger window rolled down. And he saw it. A gun. A split second later, a shot rang out. His windshield exploded in a web of cracks. Damn it! He swerved hard, barely avoiding another bullet. He had to lose them. Now. His eyes darted to an upcoming tunnel, a stretch of road that ran beneath the city. That was his chance. He gunned the accelerator, aiming straight for it. The SUV stayed on his tail. Inside the tunnel, the darkness swallowed them. The only light came from dim overhead lamps, casting flickering shadows on the road. Then, an idea. He spotted an upcoming maintenance exit, a barely visible opening to a side tunnel meant for emergency vehicles. It was risky. If he missed, he'd crash at full speed. But if he didn't take the chance, he was dead anyway. He cut the wheel hard. The car skidded sideways, slipping through the narrow opening just in time. The SUV flew past, unable to follow. He kept driving, heart slamming against his ribs. After a few twists and turns, he found an abandoned parking lot and pulled in, killing the engine. Silence. His breathing was ragged. His hands trembled against the steering wheel. What the hell was happening to him? The truth, he didn't want to hear. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He almost didn't answer. But he needed answers. He pressed the phone to his ear. "Who are you?" he demanded. A pause. "Then, you're asking the wrong question." The voice was calm. Too calm. His jaw clenched. "Fine. What do you want?" Another pause. Then the voice said something that made his blood run cold. "To remind you of who you really are." His breath caught. His grip on the phone tightened. "What are you talking about?" A chuckle. "You think you built your own life, don't you? That you're a self-made man. That your success was earned." A dark pause. "But you were never in control, Carter. You were placed." His stomach twisted. "No," he said firmly. "That's a lie." "Is it?" The voice was amused now. "Think about it. Think about the deals that went in your favor. The connections that appeared at just the right time. The way every move you made led you higher. Do you really think that was all you?" The millionaire's breath was shallow. "No," he whispered. "That's not possible." The voice continued, smooth and cold. "You were meant to rise. You were meant to have power. Because when the time came, you would be useful to us." A chill ran through him. He had worked hard. He had built his empire from the ground up. Hadn't he? Or had it all been guided? He felt sick. His world was unraveling, and he didn't know where the lies ended and the truth began. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice hoarse. A pause. "Then, you already know." Click. The line went dead. The millionaire sat in the silence of his car, his mind spiraling. If what they said was true, then his entire life, his success, his power, had been manufactured. And now, they had come to collect. He wasn't free. He had never been free. And the worst part? He had no idea what they wanted him to do next. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked windshield as the millionaire sat motionless in his car, the phone still clutched in his trembling hand. "You were meant to rise. You were meant to have power. Because when the time came, you would be useful to us." The words echoed in his mind, twisting everything he had ever believed about himself. A lie. His entire life had been a lie. He had spent decades fighting his way to the top, thinking he had beaten the odds. That he had outworked, outsmarted, and outmaneuvered every obstacle in his path. But now, the truth stared him in the face like a cruel joke. He was never in control. His pulse pounded. Then who was? And worse, what did they want from him now? A sharp knock on his driver's side window nearly made him jump. His instincts flared. His hand hovered near the gun in his coat as he turned, the investigator. Soaking wet, breathing heavily, eyes darting around like a hunted animal. The millionaire yanked open the door. "Get in." The man slid into the passenger seat, slamming the door shut behind him. "We don't have much time." The millionaire's stomach twisted. "You're alive." "Barely," the investigator muttered. His face was bruised, his knuckles bloodied. "They came after me too." The millionaire clenched his jaw. "Who are they?" The investigator exhaled sharply. "Powerful people. The kind you don't cross. The kind who, he hesitated, then glanced at him. Who own you? The words sent a fresh wave of anger through him. No one owns me, he snapped. The investigator gave a hollow laugh. That's what I used to think. A tense silence settled between them. Then the investigator reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. Worn. Faded. The edges frayed like it had been handled 1,000 times. I found this, he said, setting it on the dashboard. It's about you. The millionaire's fingers hovered over it. Inside, the investigator continued, is every major business move you've ever made. Every deal. Every chance encounter that led you to where you are today. His eyes darkened. And it all ties back to them. A cold shiver ran down his spine. His fingers tightened around the folder, then he flipped it open. Inside were documents. Files stamped with red markings, confidential memos, surveillance photos, of him. And at the center of it all, a symbol. The same 3 jagged lines cutting through a circle. His breath hitched. It wasn't just on the old man's wrist. It wasn't just some forgotten memory from his past. It was everywhere. In financial reports. On contracts. On letters from anonymous investors who had supported his rise to power. His entire empire had been built with their hands. The rage in his chest burned like wildfire. They've been pulling the strings the whole time, the investigator said. The millionaire swallowed hard. Then why come for me now? The investigator hesitated, then spoke. Because you're no longer an asset. You're a liability. The word settled over him like a noose tightening around his neck. They're giving you a choice, the investigator continued. Either you fall back in line, or you disappear. The choice. A storm brewed inside him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about profits, investments, or power plays. He was thinking about revenge. He had spent his life being controlled. That ended now. They think they own me? The millionaire's voice was ice. Then let's see what happens when I don't play by their rules. The investigator hesitated. You don't understand. No, the millionaire cut him off, eyes blazing. I understand perfectly. He grabbed the folder, gripping it like a weapon. I've spent my life making other people play my game. Now, it's my turn. The investigator exhaled sharply. Then you'd better be ready. Because once you make that choice, there's no going back. The millionaire looked him dead in the eyes. I was never meant to survive. A pause. Then, but I did. And now, he was going to burn their whole world to the ground. The city skyline glowed as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the streets. The millionaire sat alone on a park bench, his mind racing with everything he had learned. The old man had disappeared again, just as mysteriously as he had arrived, leaving behind only a few cryptic words. The truth is only a burden if you ignore it. What you do next is up to you. For the first time in years, the millionaire felt empty, not because of what he had lost, but because of what he had never truly had. His wealth, his empire, his status, they had been built on illusions, a carefully crafted life dictated by forces he never even knew existed. Everything he thought he had earned was, in some way, manipulated. But the old man's lesson was clear. It didn't matter where he came from or what had been done to him. What mattered was what he did now. Across the street, he saw a young boy struggling to carry a heavy bag. Without thinking, he rose to his feet, crossed the road, and helped him lift it. The boy's mother, watching from a distance, nodded in gratitude. It was such a small act. Yet, as he turned back toward the city, he realized that true power wasn't in wealth, control, or influence, it was in the ability to change lives, even in the smallest ways. He had spent his entire life chasing something he could never truly hold. Now, he was finally free to choose his own path. For the first time in his life, he smiled, not the rehearsed, polished smile of a businessman, but a real, genuine one. And as he walked away, he knew the past no longer controlled him. The future was his to define.